Hey guys, so I'm going to actually walk you through one of the Alex assignments. And I'm actually really glad I've done this a few times. I had to like re record because I found some errors in the notes. So I'm going to point those out to you too. So let's go ahead and get started. This assignment is actually to walk you through percents and then getting comfortable with converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. So this is the assumption that you guys have already watched the YouTube lesson going over this. So you already know that a percent means out of 100. And you already know that the fraction line also means to divide. You're going to need to know those two things to get through today's assignment. Okay. So, for instance, when they're asking you to write 97 hundredths as a percentage, um, basically the one rule that you need to know is that in order to find a percent, you need to have a number out of 100. So when you're looking at a fraction, it's whatever the number is on top. Your numerator is the percent. So 97 over 100, your percent is 97%. If it was 3 over 100, it would be 3%. If it is 42 over 100, it is 42%. That one's pretty easy, right? So I'm just going to bust that out and we're going to make sure to use the percent sign on there. And away we go. Okay. So here's another question. This is kind of working backwards now. So now we start with our percent, 20%. We want to write it as a fraction. We don't need to simplify it. Well, a percent means out of 100, right? And whatever the number is goes over 100. So literally, the fraction is going to be 20 over 100. Okay. So whatever the number is, it's over 100. If it is 3%, it's 3 over 100, right? Okay. Moving on, because I think those are pretty darn easy. Here we go. So 3 through 6 are going to be a little trickier, and I'm going to toggle back and forth between the assignment and our notes. Okay. So to start off with, here is one. We are going to focus on writing 1 6/10 as a percentage. Okay. So when I go to my notes in Canvas, okay, I'm trying to go from, what was it again? 1 6/10 as a percent. So from a decimal to a percent. If you guys notice, here's our changing a decimal to a percent. How do we do that? We move a decimal point 2 places to the right. Essentially, what you're doing when you're moving from a decimal to a percent is you are multiplying it by 100. Your number needs to get larger. We're multiplying it by 100. So that's why you're moving it to the right. That makes your number larger. And you move it twice because you're multiplying by 100. And we are starting to learn that that's kind of our cheat method, right? 2 zeros. So you're multiplying it and you're moving it twice to the right. Okay. So for some examples, while we have the notes pulled up, right, we're going to move our decimal point 2 places to the right. Okay. So what if I had 3/10, right? No matter what, here is my decimal. It is like you are peeling it off of your paper and you're flipping it like a pancake. Okay. So where are we flipping it to? We're flipping it to the right. So I'm going to take it, peel it off, and put it here. One move. And then I'm moving it another time. So it is now, I'm going to fill my baskets with zeros, right? And that's basically the same thing as me multiplying that 3/10 by 100. So now I have 30%. Okay. What if I had instead, we're gonna do 4 2/10, right? Okay, so 4 2/10. Same rule. No matter what, you're gonna need to multiply it by 100 to turn it into a percent. So you are going to move it twice to the right. Okay, so 1, 2. And that is going to make it sit right here. Okay. So we're going to have 420 So sorry. That is the worst handwriting ever. I might as well be like blindfolded and writing with my left hand. Sorry. It's very hard on this trackpad. Okay. So 420%, you're just moving it twice to the right, twice to the right, twice to the right, because you're multiplying by 100 every single time. Okay. So let's go back to our Alex. We are taking 1 and 6/10 and writing it as a percent. So we need to multiply it by 100, which means move it twice to the right. So I'm going to have my decimal point here instead, and I am going to fill my basket with a 0. Okay, that's my cheat way. If you wanted to, you can multiply it longhand off to the side, but it's going to give you 160 with kind of an invisible decimal point right there. Okay. So I'm going to type in 160% here. Okay. Now let's go ahead and switch off to this. This is talking about writing a percent as a decimal. So we're working backwards, right? So let's check out our notes. We're going from a percent to a decimal. Okay, so if we are going from a percent to a decimal, I want you to think about being able to take the knowledge that we just did, right? We moved it twice to the right if we were multiplying it by 100. So I wonder what we're going to do if we have to divide or work backwards, okay? So we were doing decimals to percents. Now we're doing percents to decimals. So we're going in the opposite direction. Okay. So we know that if I start out with a percent, it's the same thing as saying over 100, right? Okay. So like this example right here is 30%. So if I wanted to write that as a fraction, I would say 30% means 30 over 100, right? Well, this is the same thing as saying 30 divided by 100. And that's why I said that's important to remember that fraction line means division. Okay. So now that we know every number, when it's a percent, it's out of 100, it means divide by 100. So if I take 30 and I divide it by 100, guess what I'm going to get? Blink, blink, blink. I am using the same cheat method as before. I have my 30, right? And I know I'm going to divide. So my number is getting smaller. That means my invisible decimal point is going to have to move twice to the left this time because I'm getting smaller. That's the direction it has to go to get smaller, right? Okay. So I'm moving it twice because I'm dividing by 100 and I have 2 zeros. So that's just kind of my cheat method, right? So here we go. Boop. And do. There we go. Okay. So that's where you're getting this 30 hundredths from. Okay. I also, if I read it out loud, it says that decimal, doesn't it? 30 hundredths, 30 hundredths. Okay. Another example to look at would be here. If I'm at 57%, another way of saying that is 57 over or out of 100, right? Okay. So, oh, sorry, I lied. There's a decimal point sitting right there. Okay. Okay, this is perfect. So this is saying 57 hundredths. I have to divide this decimal on top, right, by 100. I'm still going to start where my decimal point is at, and I am making my number smaller. So I have to move it to the left, and I have to go twice. Okay, so I'm going to go twice to the left. 1, 2, because that makes it smaller. That's where my new decimal place goes, and I fill the rest with zeros. Okay, so whether you start with a whole number or you start with a decimal, that's your rule. You're going to divide by 100. So your decimal point's going to move to the left twice. Okay, so let's look at this. Clearing the screen. Here we go. We're starting out with this percentage. 67 and 98 hundredths, right? And because it's a percent, it means I need to divide it by 100, right? That's what percent means, okay? So don't let this freak you out, right? Because when you divide by 100, it just means you have to move your decimal point twice to the left because you're making it smaller. right? So essentially, our decimal point is going to end up being 6,798 ten thousandths is how you say that. Okay, so you just read the number as you would, 6,798, and then it ends up staying in the 10,000ths spot, right? Tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000ths. So that's how you say it. Okay. Here we go. Let's try another one. Moving on. All right. Hopefully this is kind of starting to make sense to you. If not, don't worry about it. It's our very first day. Okay, that's what happens. Sometimes the first day, like what we say in our math promises, right? If you're not struggling, you're not learning. So if this is like blowing your mind right now, that's okay. It means you're learning something brand new. Okay, it's going to hurt for a little bit. Here we go. So 40% as a fraction. Well, we already said a percent is out of 100, right? So if we're talking about 40%, it means 40 out of 100. Cool. So whatever the number is, that's what you put over 100. Okay. So I'm going to make sure it's in fraction form. It is 40 over 100. That one I thought was pretty easy. Hopefully you did too. Oh, this said in simplest form. My bad. Okay. So now we need to divide, right? So if you get stuck on problems like this, you can use your fact chart. Look to see if you see 40 and 100 in the same column. You will, definitely, for sure. I'm going to say I'm going to divide both of these by 20. That's what pops in my head immediately. Okay. So how many 20s are going to fit into 40? 2. Okay. 2 times 20 is 40. How many 20s will go into 100? 5. Okay. So let's go back in and we're going to do 2/5 instead. Okay. I don't even know what that just did. All right. 2/5. 2/5. Cool. All righty. Here we go. All right. So we have one more problem. Let's see if it's going to be anything like the others. Okay, so this is 2/4 as a percentage. Hopefully you know this one. If not, start to think about it just with number sense. Forget all these silly rules, right? 2 out of 4. We have 4 cookies and you eat 2 of them. I can't do that in the mirror image. Okay. 4 and you eat 2 of them. What percent does that look like? Looks like about half, right? So if you talk about half, what percent would that be? I'm wondering. Hopefully you're like, I'm ready to move on. If not, let's go ahead and look at this, right? So you have a fraction and you need it as a percent. I just want to point this out. So here we go. We have a fraction and we want it as a percent. Do I have it on here? I don't think I do. Okay. Fractions as a percent. I don't even know. Fraction as a percent. Here we go. Okay. So percent means out of 100, right? So if you have a fraction and you want it out of a percent, your main goal is trying to turn your denominator into a place value. Okay. You might remember doing this with me. Okay. So whatever your denominator is, you want to multiply it by something so it becomes your 100%. So let's look back at our problem here. Okay. So we have 2/4, right? And if you can't automatically figure out what percent that is, you can go through and say, okay, how can I get this to be 100 on the bottom? Because a percent is out of 100, right? So I know if I take 4 and I multiply it by 25, I get 100. So whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do the top, right? Okay, so 2 times 25 is 50, right? And then all I got to think about is, what are they asking me to do again? To find a percent? So whatever number is on top of my 100, that is my percent, 50%, right? Woody boo. Okay. So there's my lovely handwriting again. Here we go. So I need to type in 50%. Okay. And then we have one more problem. Hopefully it gives us another one of like converting so we can kind of practice like that. Shh, it did not. We'll go back to those if we need to. Okay, so 48/50ths as a percentage, right? So again, going back to our notes, right? If you're like, the question is asking me to go from a fraction to a percent, you can check on your notes, and I'm literally making it as big as I possibly can. How to go from a fraction to a percent, right? And I give you some examples. Make your denominator 100 because a percent is out of 100, right? So it's kind of the same concept of what we just did, right? So how are we going to turn that denominator of 50 into 100? What can we multiply it by, right? So this one's pretty quick and easy. We're just going to take 48 over 50. And I know if I multiply 50 by 2, I'm going to get 100. And why do I want 100 on the bottom? Because percents are always out of 100. So whatever I do here, I got to do here, right? So I'm going to multiply this by 2. Yep. 96. Okay. So we have 96 as our percent. 96%. Okay, cool. I want to go back to this guy though. What was it? It was this one. All right. I want to try another one. Okay. Because I'm sure that these are definitely more complicated for you to figure out than the rest of them. So let's go ahead and give you guys some more practice with that. All right. So here we go. The first one says write 6 as a percentage. Okay, that one seems a little bit easier than last time, but okay. To write 6 as a percentage, right? We're just going from a number to a percent, right? So if we go through and check out our notes, we could say, I'm trying to go from like a number to a percent. Okay. Decimal to a percent, right? So you could look at this and know that you have to go twice to the right, okay, with the number to a percent. Or you could look back at some of our notes from the top and just say, is it not going to let me scroll right now? There we go. So we want to go from a number to a percent. Same thing here, right? By putting it over, by writing it as a fraction, but we don't really have something to write as a fraction because there's not like a true decimal. So we'll just kind of stick with the rules that we had before. It's a decimal to a percent. So we're moving it twice to the right. If these don't suit you, then the bottom ones that are in my handwriting are the exact same thing. Decimal to percent, twice to the right. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to take 6 and I need to move my decimal twice to the right, but there's no decimal. Do you remember where a decimal goes in a whole number? Is it sitting here? It could not be sitting there because that would not be a whole number, right? It has to be sitting here. It's just the invisible math of the world, right? Until you need it, you don't really put it down, but technically you could and it would mean the same thing. Okay, so this is 6, right? And we want to write it as a percent. It's literally just that number over 100, right? We want it as a percent. So it's 6%. We need to, if you check decimal, and we're moving it right twice, right? Oh. Okay, let's try this again. So we're going right 6 as a percent. Oh my gosh. 6 as a percent. We are literally saying, okay, I'm going to go back. Okay, so to review a few more of these that might be a little bit trickier, we're going to look at this this first example. It says to write 6 as a percentage, right? And a percent is always out of 100, right? So if I want to go through and I say, 6 Oopsies. Okay. 6 has an invisible number there, right? But we're basically saying any number, oopsies, 6 out of 100. This is 6%, right? 6% is 6 over 100, right? Um, 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 doesn't make any sense to me. Hmm. Okay, so before we move on, I kind of clicked back on here. I wanted to give us a little bit more practice with with the submission part, right? Okay, so I'm going to say that I would like to have some more examples of this. If it's going to let me, I hope it lets me, right? Does it let me? It should be able to say like, do you want any more? I would like some more, please. And it's not going to, oh, here we go. Okay, try another. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so in order to give us more practice, I went ahead and I created another assignment just so we could look at a few more of these. Okay, so if you are looking at this specific example here, right, it's 7 and 4/10%, and we want to write it as a decimal. So if you're going from a percent to a decimal, what do you want to be doing? Okay. Percents always mean out of 100, correct? So if I look back here, I'm going from a percent to a decimal. I want to go from a percent to a decimal, right? So if you look, it's saying, hey, as a percent, right? You want to make that percent out of 100, and then you're going to be able to write it immediately as a decimal. So let's see if that works. So if I take this, right, and I write it as a, take 7 and 4/10, right? And I'm going to write it as, look how they did it, write it out of 100, right? No matter what, they put it over 100, right? Because 8% means out of 100. Da, 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 da. Makes sense to me, right? So as soon as you see those little percent signs, you can kind of reshuffle them around and know that it needs to be out of 100 on the bottom, right? And then what does it tell you to do? As soon as you make it out of 100, then you should be able to write it as a decimal, right? So this is if it's 81 out of 100 or 8 out of 100 or 80 out of 100. So let's see what this says, right? 7 and 4/10 out of 100. That's weird because it doesn't look like any of these examples, right? This is showing that whatever number on top you have, it lands in the 100th spot. Have you noticed that? So the 8 is in the 100th spot. The 80 is in the 100th spot. Well, our number is 7 and 4/10. That's not going to land in the 100th spot, right? It's in the 10th spot. So I know I have a decimal point, and this is my 100th spot, right? So if I want 7 and 4/10 to stop at the 100th spot, this is what it's going to look like. Their other way of looking at it is to say, I need to be able to, okay. So we're going from a decimal to a a percent to a decimal, right? So a percent to a decimal, you're moving your decimal point 2 places to the left. So here we go. I'm right here, and I'm going to move it 2 places to the left. So now I have 7 4/10, and it is landing in not the hundredth spot. It's really weird. I don't get that one. Percents to decimals. There's a percent to a decimal. Man. All right. Okay, so I went ahead and I created another assignment so that way we could do a little bit more practice with these because these do get kind of tricky. So again, if you are struggling with this, remember our class promises, if you're not struggling, you're not learning, okay? It would just be busy work. So if your brain hurts right now, that's a good thing. It means that you are learning something brand new, and that is okay. It is way okay to be confused at the beginning, all right? So we're going to look at this. We're starting with a percent and we want to go to a decimal. Okay. So if you look back, if we are looking at how to get from a percent to a decimal, the overall rule is that you're just moving your decimal point 2 places and you're going to the left. Okay. So we want to go, we have 7 4/10, right? And we want to go 2 places, doot, doot, to the left. All right. Because if you think about it, we have 7 4/10 out of 100. And remember our main rule when we say out of 100, this means divide, right? If we divide by 100, we would essentially get an answer where it would look like this. We're just using the cheat method. The cheat method is to just move it twice to the left and save all the time of having to do it by hand. Oh, okay. So again, when you see a percent, it means out of 100 or to divide by 100. So you move it twice to the left. Cool. Okay. Second question, we start with a decimal and we want to go to a percent. So if we look back at our notes, we want to go from a decimal to a percent, right? So if we are at a decimal, such as this, doot, doot. My handwriting is just atrocious right now. Okay, we're at a decimal, right? And we want to go to a percent. I can use this to say, I'm going to see if I can scroll out. Okay. See if I can still move my decimal point twice, right? Because we're still working with 100. But since we're going from a decimal to a percent, we're actually multiplying by 100, which means our numbers are going to be getting larger. We're multiplying by 100. That's why we're moving it to the right this time instead. Okay. Let's see if I can find the other set of notes. So to go from a decimal to a percent, I'm scrolling for those words. Decimals to a percent, decimal to fraction. Here's your decimal to percent. Still says you're just moving it twice to the right. Okay, so either way, if you prefer just looking at my handwriting because you're used to it, and this is like, I like big math, it makes sense to me. Or if you like seeing the teeny tiny examples right here, I don't know why that just moved. That's kind of funny. You can look at it here instead. So it's up to you. Okay. This is also another way to look at it. I don't know if you notice this, but yeah, it kind of tells you what you need to do if you're multiplying or dividing to get from one to another. So here we go. So we are going to be getting larger, right? We're moving our decimal to the right. So we are actually going to take our decimal, move it twice to the right, and that's how we get 52 4/10 of a percent. Okay. Don't forget the percent sign. All right. So let's see here. We had, I'm going to type this in. So hopefully it'll give us another one. So we wanted to go from a percent to a decimal. So we moved it twice to the left, right? And we went from a decimal to a percent. So we moved it twice to the right. So that gave us, okay, Here we go. Chicken, chicken, chicken. Here's one more. Let's try another. All right. And then we'll end. Okay. So here we are. We have a percent and we want it as a decimal, right? So again, anytime you're talking about a percent, does not matter what the number is. It's still out of 100. So I have 480 out of 100 because we're saying 480%. That means we are going to divide by 100, which means our number is going to get smaller, which means that our decimal point is sitting right here. We're going to move it twice to the left. Okay, so our decimal becomes 4 and 8/10. Okay, or you could even say 4 and 80/100 if you wanted to keep that 0. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and type that here. And then if we are going from a decimal to a percent, we're multiplying by 100. We're getting larger. Okay. So that means instead we are going to be moving our decimal in the other direction, right? So if we look, we are going to be moving it right. That makes our number get greater, right? So it's always by 2, right? We move it twice because of the 2 zeros in 100. If you want to solve it in a calculator, you can, but this is a great way to just kind of cheat it out, right? So I'm going to move it twice to the right here. So it goes from this to this. 1, 2. It sits right there. So technically, it is 56 hundredths of a percent. Okay, so and away we go. All right, so hopefully this is helping you a little bit. Check back with me more. I will record more practice problems soon.